And in more news from the Indo-Pacific, a surge in respiratory illnesses in China, particularly among children, has reportedly swamped pediatric units in city hospitals. According to the media reports of mass respiratory illness over the past few months have understandably renewed worries of a wider outbreak involving a new virus. Tianjin Children's Hospital is reportedly handling more than 13,000 patients every day in its outpatient and emergency departments, which is a record. Last week, the pediatric outpatient clinic of the Civil Aviation General Hospital in Beijing was coping with about 600 visits each day, up 30 to 50% from the same period last year. And my colleague Andrew Wood joins us for more on this story from Hong Kong. Andrew, give our viewers a sense of how bad is it really the situation in obtaining in China today as we speak?
It's difficult to assess in some ways because we're getting episodic and anecdotes and not getting a countrywide picture yet, I think, from the authorities. A couple of things to say. First of all, in a way, you'd expect there to be more flu and more pneumonia this time this year than last year, because this time last year, China was in the middle of some very, very strict COVID lockdowns, and the measures you take to stop the spread of COVID also stop the spread of pneumonia and flu and other respiratory illnesses. And so there was an expectation that there might be a bounce back this winter in China. That said, there does seem to be a surprising rise in the pneumonia in children caused by Mycoplasma bacteria. That has puzzled some doctors, and there's questions being asked about whether the Mycoplasma bacteria, whether there are strains now in China that have become resistant to antibiotics. And that would be a broader worry around the world if there's the spread of bacteria that has become resistant to antibiotics, especially the antibiotics used on children below the age of 8. The other way of looking at it is that this is just a bad year and that you do get outbreaks from time to time. But of course, everybody is so sensitive about China because remember, in the early days of COVID, China was not very forthcoming with information. It seemed to cover things up. So there's that suspicion that even if the outbreak is under control, like the Chinese authorities say, there might be more to it.
Indeed. And also, Andrew, it was the COVID-19 virus then, and now it's a bacteria. What do we know about this new strain that's causing so much worry in China and around the world? And what can possibly China and the world do together to contain its spread? Because the WHO, for one, has voiced some concern over these, the outbreak in China.
Yes, the news or the Chinese authorities are saying that although perhaps the bacteria are unusual, they are recognizable. They've coped with these before, and we know what the bacteria are. They're not novel in the way that COVID was. It showed up more or less from nowhere, and the point was there that doctors didn't know, they could only treat the symptoms. They didn't know how to cure people of it, and there were no vaccines and so on. So in this respect, it appears that what we're getting is perhaps not the world's most common bacteria, but they're known and doctors have experience of dealing with them. As I say, there's always that suspicion, though, with China that perhaps you're not being told something.
Indeed. Andrew Wood in Hong Kong, thank you once again for sharing your inputs with our viewers. Appreciate it.